Today I'm talking with Dana Freling. She's in Finland. Dana grew up in Dallas, graduated from Stanford, and then guess what happened? She met a Finn, and ever since 1991, she's had a suitcase in Finland, and in fact has been living there since 1995. Her daughter, Hannah, in fact, was an intern at the World Affairs Council about a year or two ago. Great to see you.
So nice to see you too, Jim.
So as I mentioned when we were talking about doing this, we've been visiting with friends and contacts around the world about how COVID-19 is affecting their personally as well as their country. And when I was reading about Finland, it looks like it's been quite successful, especially compared to some of its neighbors. Give us a sense of what your life has been like.
The Finnish government has tried to strike a balance between the extremes of a total shutdown on one end and the position that Sweden has taken on another end with their attempt to create a herd immunity. It's important to understand that when this began, we didn't know what was going to face us. And Finland was very cautious in the way they approached it. And they understood that if there was a massive surgence of cases, that our health system might be overwhelmed. I think that everybody is facing that problem, and we had the luxury, if you want to call it that, of witnessing what was happening in Italy, that people were dying, that health facilities had to choose who lived, who died, who had access to ventilators. It was important that we try to contain this early so that we were able to procure the protective equipment, we were able to procure the testing equipment, and to teach people about what this meant and what social distancing was. So there's a rather early comparatively compared to Southern Europe, measures that were taken.
And to look at it another way, I saw yesterday that in Finland, there's been 2.56 deaths per 100,000 residents. And that compares to Sweden, which is 17.3, in the United States, which is 13.1 per 100,000. And as of yesterday, there were approximately 5,500 cases in Finland.
That is correct, and 242 deaths.
One of the things, Dana, that I found fascinating, and I didn't know this at all, was that Finland has had a very different approach towards preparation, and it dates back to World War II. Can you tell us a little bit more about Finland's mentality about really getting medical supplies and being sure that you had what you needed insofar as reserves for food?
Finland was engaged in two wars with Russia just prior to World War II, which we call the Winter War. And then they created an alliance with Nazi Germany to fight against Russia in World War II. They subsequently lost an area of their land to Russia in reparations. But because we have that risk, that threat always facing us to the east, there have been always been stockpiles of medical equipment and food so that we are ready for times of crisis, for any kind of war. And this is a type of war. We are at war with the virus.
Tell us about your prime minister. She was, for a brief period of time, the youngest prime minister. Now she's not the youngest, but she's the youngest female prime minister.
She's not the youngest? She is the youngest.
Not anymore. Apparently, the prime minister from Austria is a month younger.
Really? I had not.
So she's the youngest female.
I had
Still
not.
A pretty good record. She's 34 years old, I believe.
She's 34 years old, and not only is she the youngest, well, I didn't realize that Austria had overtaken us, but the entire cabinet, which is made up of the heads of different parties, because in Finland, it's not one party that's in government, as in the United States. You've got, we were multi-party system, and the heads of each party will have important positions within the cabinet. So if you look at the top 5 positions within the cabinet, apart from the man to your left, who's the Minister of Foreign Affairs, actually they're all women, and 4 of the 5 women are under the age of 34.
And which party is she in?
Sanna Marin, our Prime Minister.
Yes, the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm.
Prime
Sanna
Minister in
Marin.
the Democratic Party.
Okay.
So we've always got parties that are in opposition and parties that are a part of, that have created a coalition to be a part of the government. So the Minister of Education, the Minister of Economy, these are all women, and all women, except for the Swedish speaking party representative. She's in her 50s. All the other women are under the age of 34. And I have to say, within Scandinavia and the Nordic countries, of all the countries represented in this Nordic bloc, the prime ministers are all women. The countries are all led by women, except Sweden, which you see has taken a very different approach to this pandemic.
Very interesting. Give us a sense about the lockdown, our shelter in place. Are you following pretty much the same procedures that are happening or have been happening in the United States, or is it different? Is it all the same across the country?
It is the same across the country. The vast majority of cases are happening in the metropolitan area, in the capital region, which comprises of Helsinki, the city of Espoo, where I am, and Vantaa. It's a metroplex. And we see over half the cases of COVID in this area. So there was a period of time, now the cordon has been lifted, but the government imposed martial law and cordoned off the capital region of the state of Uusimaa from the rest of the country to prevent the further spread to other regions of the country. They were very careful to do everything according to the law. It took a while.
Well, that's a strong word, martial law. Be specific. I mean, what was involved?
That the borders were maintained by the military.
Mm. And is that still the case, or has that been lifted?
The city, if you had permission, if you were had to work in another city, or if you had a relative you needed to take care of there, but you had to have specific permission, and this was monitored by the military.
I know your children are out of school now, but are schools open, or will they reopen prior to the end of this academic year?
So now the schools were closed down on the 18th of March, and a decision has been made by the government, because at the moment we're on a plateau. It's not going up, it's not going down, but I think that they've been very careful to balance how they are handling this, not to destroy the economy, and also according to the welfare of the children, because it can be unhealthy for the children, especially young children, to be home all the time. Those with learning differences, those who may have problems in the household. The school system here is very strong. It is lauded worldwide for their achievements in education. So now there has been a decision to let children up to 9th grade, before they start high school, to go back to school for 2 weeks starting the 14th of May. But I want to make also clarify one difference, that here, though restaurants and bars have been closed, public spaces like libraries, movie theaters, any gatherings above 10 people are forbidden. Normal businesses have been allowed to stay open, and they have stayed open. There are hair salons open. There are clothing stores open. If you go to the local malls, which are open, you have seen maybe the large chains, H&M, H&M and Zara, they're open. Hardware stores are open. If you enter an establishment, there will be hand sanitizer, and there are announcements made over the loudspeaker to keep a distance, and people have been taught how to socially distance, but that there is that leeway, there is that freedom.
Are people wearing masks?
They are not. A few people are wearing masks. You cannot buy masks here. And there's a lot of discussion now in the media and among the government officials whether or not to they are recommending them, but they're simply not available.
Dana, we're beginning in the United States to have interruptions in our food chain. We're beginning to have interruptions in our food chain. Have you had any issues there?
No, not yet. At the beginning, when this first hit, I also, like many people, watched the film Contagion, right? Did you see it?
Yes.
And we went into the grocery stores, and though Finland is the largest producer of toilet paper in the world, you couldn't find toilet paper. You went especially to the meat section. The meat, I have pictures of the aisles in the large grocery stores. Everything had been depleted. All the rice and noodles. But 2 days later, the shelves were all stocked again. There hasn't been a problem in disruption yet.
That's great. You indeed do still have a foot in Dallas and a foot in Finland. What are people saying? What are you thinking about how the United States has been handling this pandemic, and really its international or lack of international presence?
That's a very interesting question, Jim. I think an important question, because I speak to my family and my friends at home. I have friends in different areas of the United States, and I see it from quite a different perspective. I don't want to be critical, but I hear frequently from Americans and other people, foreigners living outside the United States, their dismay at the lack of leadership. It seems federal leadership. Things that come out of the White House, mixed messaging. I have been impressed, and people are impressed with certain governors that have risen to real positions of comfort and leadership, like Cuomo in New York and Newsom in California. The type of encouragement and wisdom and strength and compassion and rules, to unite the people, and that we are in this together. I don't think this should be a time where the population should be divided according to red and blue, according to whether they're Democratic or Republican.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, unfortunately, because we're in this political season, I think this is a wish that we're unable to achieve.
Do with being in an election year, because this polarity has increased over the last 4 years like I have never seen in the United States.
Before we go, I want to ask you about testing. Are you able, if you wanted to get a test, could you get one today? And would you be charged, or does the government take care of it?
In Finland, we have universal health care. We don't pay for any medical needs. We actually have a private healthcare system that sits alongside with a universal healthcare system. You choose, and about 50% of the people do have private healthcare here, but universal healthcare is available for all citizens. So can you get tested? Absolutely, you can get tested. Initially, when the crisis erupted, they had minimal tests. They didn't have adequate testing. So testing was reserved for healthcare workers and those who were ill enough that they needed to be admitted to hospital. And gradually that testing expanded and expanded. So if you have symptoms, you call, you are sent somewhere and you will get a test immediately. There have also been now a large number of tests that have been randomly given around the population to confer immunity, to try to see what percentage of the population is now immune. Now, I understand that these immunity tests are not always reliable. We hope that they are going to be more widely available and more accurate in the future.
Well, Dana, I want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your perception. You and I always see each other in July when you come and visit your family. I hope that indeed happens. But in the meanwhile, best to your family and stay well.
Thank you. Well, it's great to see you, Jim.